Howdy, howdy. Welcome back to my tiny corner of the internet. And so this channel has just been getting a lot of viewers and new subscribers, more than I actually really anticipated, which has kind of shocked me, is because the fact is I originally wanted this video to be a 1K subscriber special, and I had a couple of things that I wanted lined up to basically have for this video. But the thing is this channel has grown faster than I anticipated for it, is because the fact is, you know, a couple of days ago when I wanted to make the 1,000 subscriber special, as I'm recording this right now, like the channel's just reached 1.2K, and that's like 200K, like, you know, 200 subs, like above like where I wanted to release a video celebrating the 1K subscriber special. So, but the original idea behind the video was that I was going to release an article about a policy table of what I think needs to happen to reindustrialize the United States, what it takes to make American labor competitive, and on top of that, open up a public Discord server for people to come in and have public discussions and public debates. But the thing is that, like, number one, it's like this happened so fast that it wasn't able to actually get around to basically creating that article. I'm about 60 of the way percent complete. And on top of that, the Discord server, it's like I have to set up all the auto modding stuff. I have to set up a rule server set. I just don't really use Discord a whole lot these days. And so, you know, the fact is I have to set up all that infrastructure. I have to get a moderator team. But the goal was to basically have a public Discord server that I was going to link in this video. And so, you know, people could come in, pitch ideas, and just basically share their 2 cents and, you know, be a part of the discussion, because that seems to be a common talking point. A lot of people have asked if I was going to create a public Discord server. And that is coming down the woodworks. But the thing is that, like, you know, I'm busy. I've got a full-time job. It's like, and I'm also kind of lazy. The thing is, I just don't use Discord enough to, like, really want to manage, like, a Discord server again, is because it's just a pain in the butt. But, you know, in the process, I am getting a mod team. And so that is currently, you know, in the works to basically get that set up. And so it should be public eventually. But, you know, with that being said, want to go ahead and get into the video. There's some things I want to address first up before I get too deep in the video, so let's go ahead and go over that first. So I came across a comment on my channel that just kind of rubbed me the wrong way, and it went along the lines of, you know, the fact that, you know, it was a privilege that I ever became an engineer. You know, it was a bunch of loaded language, that, you know, everything I'd ever had was provided for me, that it was, you know, even the degree that I had went to college for was just given to me willy-nilly out of the goodness of my heart. And it kind of just rubbed me the wrong ways, because the fact is there wasn't a single instance where earned was used in any of the vocabulary that this person had used. And to top it all off, it's like, you know, it started going in the whole privilege spiel. I'm pretty sure if you've dealt with a leftist, you've dealt with this kind of language before, where you have to acknowledge every other privilege under the sun before you can even talk about, you know, class politics. Okay, and I've talked a little bit about this on my channel before too, is because the fact is that kind of language has been used to police any kind of discussion about class politics in the United States. And he closes it off by saying, well, I have a feel like you only hate rich people is because you'll never become one of them. Okay, and that's kind of funny, because this is a third worldist, okay? You know, and he's more or less using the same argumentation that normicons use against leftists in general when it comes to talking about class politics whatsoever. And it's amazing is because when you're outside of the category of black, trans, Muslim woman, all of a sudden the people who are communists are all of a sudden the sternest normicons, saying that you're just jealous of rich people, which is funny, is because that's essentially what normicons say to everybody. And, you know, like I said in my previous videos, that these people really aren't that much different from one another. They're almost the same as one another. So, you know, I've got something to ask this person, because Malcolm, you know, you've caught my attention. This comment rubbed me the wrong way, so here you go. Now I'm going to talk about you. Okay, if you don't think I earned my income on what I did, is because you bitched about how I said that, you know, I should consider myself privileged for making just, you know, nominally 100K, okay? You know, what do you think somebody with the background with multiple STEM degrees deserves to be paid? I'm asking you, I'm honest. Leave a comment if you actually watch this video. I have a feeling you're not going to watch this video, because the fact is, just like every other leftist, you know, you love to talk about how you care about the working class, you really don't. And so when somebody talks about the cost of living crisis, you really don't engage with that content, but you'll talk about culture, politics all day. So what do I deserve to be paid? A man who went to a prestigious university, studied multiple STEM degrees, and has been in the workforce for many years, working in technology and engineering. What do I deserve to be paid? You know, at least 100K, is because the average house price is 525K, and just to get into the market, you need 300K, so 3 times like what that income is earns you at least the bare minimum house. All right, so yeah, leave a comment. Tell me what you think. Lastly, you said it was a privilege to barely make 100K in the big 2025, okay? If you had said this 25 years ago, when the average house price was 125K and $100 meant that you'd fill the grocery cart to the literal brim and gas was 125 per gallon, I would be like, you know what, you're right. You know, why am I even a communist? That's a huge waste of time. Why would I even do any of that stuff? I would have never created a YouTube channel. You know, and it's kind of funny is because the fact is the reason why Gen Z, you know, there's a statistic that went around that boomers mocked for a little while that says, you know, Gen Z said that they would require a salary of $500K a year to be considered wealthy, to live, you know, well within their means and enjoy the interesting thing, right? You know, funny part, 25 years ago, six figures used to be considered rich when the average house price was 120K. So when Gen Z says that they need 500K a year to live comfortably and be considered rich, they're just inflation adjusting what six figures used to mean 25 years ago, is because the average house price circa 2025 is 525K. But boomers want to pretend that six figures carries the same weight it did 25 years ago. Sorry, but 100K is the new 60K and arguably less than that, so quit the gaslighting. This is getting fucking annoying. The funny part about these people is that these are the same self-identified, we care about the working class leftists they love to pride themselves on. Okay, it's funny. The person who came in my comment section, you know, is the stereotypical leftist that loves to pride that they care about the working class. But the funny part is all the statistics that I'm bringing up in this video, you'll never hear them once talk about, ever. You will hear, you know, apolitical normies talk about the cost of living crisis well before these people do. And the people who do actually say they care about the working class, when you bring these statistics to their face and you say, this is what the average American worker is dealing with, you know, what they're struggling with, you know, all of a sudden they change their tune about how much they care about the working class, and they sound like your average normie con calling the American working class privilege. It's funny. It's because, like I said in the last video, they love to care about the working class of another country. They just hate the American working class. So you could go from wage rage rampage. This is one of the things I hate about the political left, okay? You know, because, like, you know, you could go, this is the thing I hate about it so much, okay? You could go from wage rage to wage rampage. You could pull a fucking Luigi and pop the CEO of BlackRock, and these midwits would still be accusing you of being a treat rightist because, you know, you're upset about house prices, and you're not thinking about the children in Africa who are starving and don't have houses themselves, and therefore you're privileged, just because the fact is, you know, in Africa, there are these kids that are starving, and, you know, they're dying from leukemia and having their balls chewed off by a literal tiger, and so, you know, therefore, you know, you don't know what true suffering is, so, you know, you're protesting it. Yes, I'm literally convinced most of the time that if we were in the middle of the French Revolution and we were executing rich people, you know, people were executing rich people, you know, these people would go, oh, you're not a real leftist unless you're thinking about the dying children in Africa first. That is the state of being of what I hate about the political left, especially the modern political left. So, I don't hide this fact. I don't like BlackRock. I don't like Vanguard. I don't like American Homes for Rent. I don't like Larry Fink. I don't like Larry Ellison. I don't like Klaus Schwab. I don't like a good portion of rich people, and I'm tired of pretending that I need validation from these kinds of people to hate rich people. I don't hide the fact that I was on the political left for the last 3 years when I first created my channel. I created my channel, you know, 3 years ago because I watched the World Economic Forum publish their Agenda 2030, where they taunted about the fact that in 2030 you will own nothing and you will rent everything. I watched the average house price skyrocket to what it means today, to what it is today, where the vast majority of Americans cannot afford to own their own homes. So, nonetheless, this person accused me of not being a real leftist because I didn't prioritize these issues first and foremost. And the funny part is I've gotten to the point in my life where I just don't care. I've been on the political left for the last 3 years. I tried to bring light to these issues to the political left, and quite literally, they don't care. And at one point or another, probably at the beginning of 2024, I just accepted the fact that they probably never will care about these issues. That's essentially what the post-woke left is because the fact is while I might nominally agree on the social policies that they talk about, the fact is that every single time you talk about class politics, all they can do is passive aggressively nag about something else when you can't even talk about class politics. And unfortunately, that basically pushes away the vast majority of people from ever talking about class politics in the first place, is because they like to gatekeep it. So, you know, this person accused me of not being a true leftist because I didn't agree with everything he said. Okay, you know what? Honestly, tell you what. I became a leftist is because I watched the average house price skyrocket faster than incomes. I went to the left instead of the right is because I was told the left cared about economic issues that affected ordinary workers like myself. I went to the left is because I believe they cared about the issues that I talk about in my videos. I spent years trying to bring these ideas to the left, only to be tacitly ignored with the same accusations that this guy is laying at my feet. I wrote articles about alternative economic systems that could fix the very same problems that I talk about. I was ignored for many years over all these things that I talked about. And now that I have these videos where I'm talking about the cost of living crisis, and I basically extend an olive branch and talk to people and say, you know, I want to talk about these issues that are affecting ordinary workers. You know, all of a sudden, the people who would never even interacted or even engaged with the ideas I was putting around over the last 3 years, you know, all of a sudden, they're popping up in my comment section to bitch about how I'm not a real leftist. Well, tell you what, I don't do this very often, and I don't really cede points very often, but you know what? Honestly, if leftism is a badge to wear on your chest, if it's an identity, a label, or a social club to gatekeep people out of, you know what? You can have it. You know, you can keep your label. I don't require your approval to despise the ruling class. I don't require the approval of somebody who is literally 2 steps away from being a normie-con whenever white people talk about the cost of living crisis. Or to say that American workers should be able to afford their own homes, to own their own cars, and to be able to raise a family off of a single income. Because apparently all that is ego to you. Purely ego. Because you, who cares so much about the working class, but seemingly can't figure out why leftism is more unpopular now than it has ever been, I'm fine with taking a different label. Okay, you know what? Have it your way. You can have your label back. Go fuck yourself, and have a nice day. Because obviously we have no shared values, and the fact that when I say I care about the ordinary American worker being able to afford their own home, their own car, and having the ability to raise their family off of a single income, obviously you don't care about these things, and I was mistaken in believing that left actually cared about these things. So I'm going to go to another side of the aisle, whatever that may be, that cares about the issues I want to talk about. Have a nice day. So, to give full faith and credit, there were actually a fair amount of third worldists who did call out this behavior when I did highlight it in the community post section of my YouTube channel. And I want to give visibility and credit to them is because I know over the last couple of videos, I have somehow managed to garner a large nationalist audience just by talking about the cost of living crisis. And so I do want to give visibility and full credit to them for standing up to this kind of behavior whenever anybody outside of these marginalized groups talks about the cost of living crisis, is because it makes it very difficult to engage in class politics when you have these kinds of people passive-aggressively gatekeeping you from talking about common issues that ordinary American workers are facing. I'm mostly highlighting these people is because most people on the nationalist right would assume that these third worldists all hate the American working class, which is categorically false, okay? So the fact is at the end of the day, when it comes to the economic relationship of mass migration and using third world labor to undercut American labor, you know, the problem is that these countries never actually get to develop their productive forces in the first place, and then it hollows out our nation and makes our country effectively a third world country too. And so the only person who benefits from this arrangement of trade and undercutting and, you know, cost cutting when it comes to labor is really just the ruling class. You know, a lot of people would say, you know, blame third worldists and immigrant laborers for this sorts of stuff, but who hired them? I've said this multiple times in my own comment section to say that, okay, if you're a part of the nationalist right and you hate these people, your anger is, you know, misguided. But at the end of the day, you're free to believe whatever you want to believe. I'm just a guy giving my 2 cents on the internet. But I still want to give credit to those people who called out this behavior from this person in my comment section earlier. So now I want to get into the meat of the video that I wanted to talk about since the beginning. Now that I got that 10-minute rant over some ankle-biting fuckwit in my comment section, I want to talk about how boomers abuse democracies, because the fact is I came across an interesting post where boomers are once again abusing democracy to give themselves once again more handouts. If you already follow this channel, you know I talk about the fact that boomers like to quite literally renegotiate a set of arrangements for younger people to pay into. You know, Ron DeSantis was quite proud of the fact that he wants young people to work 2 jobs to continue to fund Social Security. But Social Security has no problem going insolvent by 2033, which is funny enough when the last baby boomer literally retires. Okay? And so I'm not a big fan of democracy. I've talked a lot about over-socialized midwittery on this channel, talking about how a lot of people, if they're an over-socialized midwit, don't care about what's true. They care about what looks true or how they look compared to other people. You know for a fact that I gave up on that probably about a year ago, and I recognized the failure of the left, you know, from engaging in class politics, and I just started speaking my mind honestly on the internet, and to be fair, it has rewarded quite handsomely. But, you know, the thing is that one of the things I hate about democracy, first and foremost, is the fact is that more often than not, it sounds like a good idea in principle to have everybody vote for their self-interest, but everybody knows that when everybody's interests are being, you know, fought for exclusively, is that there's always a situation where one set of interest is at the expense of another set of interest. So it could be either slavery, it could be serfdom, it could be whatever. In the case of modern liberal democratic societies, it's boomers once again cannibalizing younger generations while they demand young people work 2 jobs to pay into Social Security, while they have their 9 Airbnb rentals that they can, you know, charge the same young generation $3,000 a month in rent. And so the system is deliberately designed to quite literally, you know, cannibalize the young. That's why the birth rates are collapsing. That's why nobody wants to have kids. You know, nobody can afford their own homes. And boomers are perfectly content with this arrangement, okay? Like I said, I have posted on this channel that boomers almost kind of live in a different and separate reality from everybody else. They call it the K-shaped economy nowadays, where you have two classes of people. The people who are part of the asset class who own things, they could be owning multiple properties, and the people who don't own things, who are renting, will never be able to own their own home. And so, you know, they live in two different realities. And so an interesting comment that was brought up on my channel is that more now than ever, I've talked about how boomers are allowed to act like petty children. You can see this in the protests with the No Kings rally, and how inconsequential their behavior is. They act like nothing can actually really be done against them, is because they're used to acting like petulant children with their parents because they lived in a time of relative abundance. Is that, you know, the thing is that when it comes to this generation, you know, they've lived in such a relatively nice period of time. It's like, you know, this stuff is relatively inconsequential to them. And so an interesting statistic is, because the fact is boomers could act like petulant children and any mistake that they made was fairly inconsequential to their existence, you know, they act like petty children as a consequence of that. Younger generations don't get that privilege, okay? And you can kind of see this in mentality. If you look at, you know, alcohol usage, you know, drug usage, they're on the decline. While simultaneously, which was also brought up by a commenter on my channel, that also mortality rates are going up. You got that correctly. Mortality rates are going up, while at the same time drug use and alcohol use are also declining. Is because people are having their standard of living severely declining. It's severely declining, but at the same time, they're also recognizing they don't have the privileges of the older generations to do the stupid things that they did and still be nominally okay. Okay, you end up losing your job, you lose your home, you're going to be like a forever rentoid. Let's be real. It's because the fact is house prices have gotten so insane that it's impossible to own your own home off of the single income. And I'm saying that as an engineer, which is kind of funny, is that the last guy was talking about it was a massive privilege to have a six figures, when, you know, it used to be that the ordinary American could afford their own home. That's the wildest part. And so the funny part is that, you know, the ruling class always hates it when you call out their wealth, and they'll always use the moral hypocrite. You're semi-decently well off, so, you know, what room do you have to say like ordinary Americans should have their own thing? Even though, because the whole kicking the ladder regime that boomers and BlackRock and the ruling class like to do is that, you know, they don't want you to criticize the system, so they always have to make sure that you know your role on the totem pole, that it can be taken away at any time, so you can't criticize it, so they continually hollow out and continue giving the next generation a new deal. They ladder kick once again, right? You know, the whole thing of ladder kicking that boomers like to do is exclusively done by the fact that they are expecting nobody to call it out, and you're going to get a comment like this where somebody's going to say, well, you're nominally privileged because you have it nominally nice, so therefore you shouldn't criticize it because you have it nicer than everybody else, and so, you know, you're a moral hypocrite. The moral hypocrite argument is a common argument that you'll often get whenever you point out this arrangement or this behavior of ladder kicking when it comes to boomers. So I'm not a pro-democracy person. I hate liberal democracy with the passion. I think it's selfish. I think it's, you know, over-socialized midwittery, yada, yada, yada. I could give a million reasons why I hate it, okay? Because the fact is, at the end of the day, you know, like boomers, because the fact is when everybody is allowed to go for free gives and say, you know, my interest above everybody else's, you know, all it takes is you getting a majoritarian bloc to basically take over the political system to get your way, okay? You know, they frustrate younger voters from ever participating in the political system is because the fact is boomers, like I said, quite literally live in a different reality than younger generations. Younger generations are having to work multiple jobs just to pay rent. They're going home broke and tired, and the last thing they want to do is sit in line and wait in line for 6 hours just to vote, okay? Boomers, who quite literally live in an alternative reality where they can move throughout the entire country comfortably and not have to worry about a care in the world, you know, have all the free time in the world to just literally stand in line and then talk bad about younger generations. And so consequentially, you know, when it comes to the political system, when boomers enter into this political system, you know, they're the ones who dominate it. Their policies dominate it. That's why, you know, at the same time, they're bitching and complaining about people who are seniors having to pay property taxes, but they also want property values to go up, so they block new constructions and they conspire with BlackRock to basically tighten up the home supply. But then they'll turn around when their property values skyrocket to what they have today to basically demand younger generations abolish property taxes only for them. They don't want to lower property taxes for everybody else. They want property taxes to be outright abolished for themselves. Because them and their 9 Airbnb rentals, they're upset that they can't just write off as a tax, even though they're literally charging, you know, younger generations $3,000 a month, okay? And the funny part is I talked about the social contract in the last video, and I said this arrangement was toxic. I said, you know, I, like many young men, You know, I'm in the similar boat to these people who are watching their entire country be hollowed out by a selfish elder generation that quite literally is willing to sacrifice younger generations at the altar just for an ounce of more, more creature comforts, to have their 10th Airbnb rental, that these people are doing this, right? And so, like that's kind of thing that resonated pretty well is because unfortunately there's a lot of things, a lot of these things are something that resonate with a lot of young people. Okay, and so the one thing I want to leave in this video is that this arrangement seems toxic. Yes, boomers are abusing democracy. Yes, they're using the political system to benefit themselves in a self-serving manner. Okay, and it's kind of funny. One of the reasons why I hate moralism so much, even though I get these midwits when I say I'm a materialist first and foremost, and not a moralist, not an idealist. It's always funny the moralist will come in here. I have found more often than not in my life the supposed moralist. More often than not the sociologist, the gaslighters, the people who are good at soft skills, the word cells, the people who pride themselves on being word cells and masters of rotating the shape rotators. I have found more often than not that these people, as much as they talk about morality, are the least moral people on the face of the planet, and they're demanding you to be the most moral. More often than not, I've found that the people who are demanding perfect moral consistency or perfect morality from you are more often than not trying to set a one-way bridge of morality that benefits one party at the expense of another, okay? You have to care about boomers, and you have to fund Social Security, because how dare you let the Airbnb rentals and the boomers lose all their investment properties, okay? And they will come with this morally loaded language why young people should pay into these structures to benefit boomers explicitly at the expense of younger generations, which I've said multiple times. I have no problem with the young taking care of the old, but the fact is this is a completely absurd relationship where you're completely cannibalizing younger generations just so you can prop up your 9 Airbnb rentals where you get to have your high property values in one breath, but you also get to have your Social Security in another breath. Me. It's the me generation. It was funny is because the fact is you've always seen that mean, weak men create hard times and hard times create strong men. It's funny that boomers are the weak men that created hard times, and now the younger generations have to be strong men to build the good times. It's crazy how boomers don't see that retrospect, okay? And so it is up to the generation now to basically put an end to this and say, we're not going to tolerate this arrangement. But the morality of these people set up is very much designed to be a one-way street of moral shaming where you have to pay into their system and set up a complete one-way street of benefits or one side of the aisle at the expense of another. You have to pay $3,000 a month, but you're also expected to pay taxes into Social Security, which will be insolvent by the time you retire. That is the double standard morality that I could see in younger generations' eyes, that this is going to be coming to an end. But unfortunately, nobody else is going to change it except for ourselves. So, what I want to say to younger generations, whether you be on the nationalist right or the communist left, yeah, get loud, get obnoxious. Obviously, stay within TOS, but the thing is that don't hide the fact that you hate these people, is because the fact is they know what they're doing is wrong and they should be called out for it. Is because the fact is if anybody who has a moral argument on their side, it's younger generations to call out the nonsense that boomers are doing, especially BlackRock, to basically cannibalize an entire younger generation. Because at the end of the day, these people are like locusts. Once they're done hollowing out the nation, they're going to move on to another nation to hollow out. And hopefully other nations don't necessarily let them in and hollow out their nations. With that being said, I think I've given my rant about boomers. I just wanted to more or less do a 1K subscriber special, just get that out of the way, is because the fact is that I felt like it was necessary to basically get that out of the way. It's because I'm already at 1.2K subs, and the fact is that's growing a lot faster than I had really anticipated. And so I just wanted to get that out of the way before I meet like 1.5K subs or even like 2K subs and, completely miss the mark. I don't know. It just kind of happened really fast. I don't expect to have a spurt of growth like that again, but like I do want to get that out of the way and just say, yeah, dude, everyone who subbed to the channel, thanks for subbing to the channel. Glad to see you around. Hope you enjoy the content and hope to see you in the next video. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.